So you know how weirdos make up stupid subjective tests to prove if something's good or not? Like you can tell an airport's good by the style of carpet, and you can tell how good a Mexican restaurant is by how faded the portraits are in there. Or how good a truck stop restroom is by how clean the glory holes are cut. Well, we at Bonsai Pop have a criteria called the Kid Dies Test. And no, it's not what you think it is, unless you think it's us judging how good an anime is by how much kid dies happens, because that's actually what it is. And Gundam Blooded Orphans is Kid Dies the Anime. The full title is actually Mobile Suit Gundam Blooded Orphans. These kids are fucked. The subtitle is put in like ant-sized text so it doesn't obscure the rest of it. Just, yeah, whatever, don't look it up. Yes, IBO is the meat grinder of the Gundam franchise, and the meat is children. This is a world where kids, teens, and below are conscripted into military service and expected to die and accept their fate with more abandon than a duck-boat soldier on D-Day. Everything isn't going to work out. Happily Ever After doesn't appear on the tvtropes.com page. And you can tell that's the case from basically the get-go. Characters you care about will die, characters you hate won't die, or they will. A lot of people die. The lines between good and evil get blurred to the point where you don't even know what's right anymore. But that's just Gundam. I mean, what makes Blooded Orphans the one to watch? Well, the show is gut-wrenching and anxiety-inducing. It doesn't even make you feel good when you finish it, kinda like eating Chipotle. But it does make you think. It makes you question the characters' decisions and how things pan out. And by the end of it, you're not even really certain whether the right choices were made to begin with. That's not to say it's in the same vein as Evangelion or Serial Experiments Lain. It's not designed to like melt your brain out of your ears. But it does mess with your moral compass. You don't know which way is up by the end. Some call that exceptional storytelling. Therapists call it existential crisis. And of course, at its core, this show is a commentary on the nature of war, the exploitation of children, and the gray areas of morality that those two end up creating. It's also an incredibly bloody mech battle anime that hits hard and it hits often. But again, that's kinda Gundam. But Blooded Orphans is a show exclusively about child soldiers fighting for their right to even exist. It's headed by a group of children who are abandoned by society and government alike, who claw their way up from the abuse and the malnutrition and the exploitation to universal acceptance, of course through the ties and trust of their chosen family. This is Blooded Orphans. Let's get into it. We all know Manscaped sponsors a lot of creators. From videos to podcasts, you probably heard a bunch of people say similar things. But I'm going to tell you what those people don't say. At Bonsai Pop, we legitimately love working with Manscaped. Not only do they support us and our editors as smaller creators, but I use their products every single day, especially now that it's summer. So I have super sensitive skin and really thick facial hair that grows in 5 different directions, and that all means I'm super susceptible to rashes and worse, ingrown hairs. Massachusetts in the summer is a nightmare of humidity, so I gotta keep the beard off. The problem was I could never get a clean shave, which leaves Devin's face scratched up by my diamond sharp stubble. Also, the trimmers I'd use on my beard would leave my facial hair sharp. I've gotten slivers from my own beard hairs, I'm not exaggerating. Well, no more. This is the Manscaped Beard and Balls Bundle featuring the Beard Hedger and the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to help you keep all your hair tight and trim. The Beard Hedger is a perfect sculptor for your whole face that's not only got the cutting power for a beard like mine, but it's waterproof so you can get it done in the shower. It also has this 20-level zoom wheel so you can set it and forget it with super ease. It's got 60 minutes of charge time so you can cut every single hair exactly the way you want it, and all the accoutrements come in this nice travel bag. And moving downstairs, the Lawnmower 5.0 gets the job done. The trimmer is where it's at. It's got rounded teeth that does the cutting, but is super gentle on your skin, right? Because there's nothing like getting a cut down there. Now you don't have to worry. You also get the foil blade if you're going for that OnlyFans look. Now, foil blades have never worked for me in the past on my face. They hurt, they left me rashy and full of ingrown hairs, but Manscaped has somehow perfected the design. I use their Handyman, sold separately, which also uses their foil technology and can get an irritation-free clean shave in about 2 minutes. Also, the Lawnmower 5.0 is waterproof as well, so you can do all your business in the shower. So get clean, get tight, do yourself or your man a favor, and use our code BonsaiPop at manscaped.com to get yourself the Beard and Balls Bundle for 20% off and free shipping. I also recommend picking up the handyman on the side. I'm not even supposed to be advertising it, it's just that good. So thank you Manscaped for sponsoring this video. We hope to work with you again soon. Now let's get back to it. Hey everybody, quick disclaimer before we get totally into this video. I have watched Blooded Orphans in both the sub and the dub, so depending on which one you watched, some of the things in here may not seem like I'm pronouncing them correctly. And it's also totally possible that I am mispronouncing things, but that's just the way it goes when there's 8,000 names in an anime. And also when you're dealing with an anime that chooses sometimes to use the Japanese pronunciation of words, and sometimes the English pronunciation of words, and sometimes their own pronunciation of certain words. This is a long video and it's even longer than it seems like it will be, but you're gonna have to wait till the end for that part. So cut me some slack or don't, it's up to you, but I just wanted to already address the most base form comments that you can possibly make before you make them. But yeah, let's get into it. Hello internet, yet again you have made my life and my job incredibly difficult and annoying. Last year I spent 8 months watching every Gundam series in the Universal Century in order to put together this comprehensive video on how to watch it and what order to watch it, and what shows were the best out of all of them, which ones were necessary. And I made the mistake of asking you guys which one of those shows you wanted me to cover specifically. And I thought, I don't know, maybe you'd pick one of the fucking shows I talked about. That would make my life easy, right? I've already watched them all, so I get to do an easier episode diving into one of those series specifically. But no, you guys didn't want Stardust Memory, you didn't want Mobile Suit Zeta, you wanted Blooded Orphans. Overwhelmingly so. And for those of you who aren't specifically Gundam nerds, Blooded Orphans doesn't exist within the Universal Century timeline. It's not even in the Future Century timeline. It is all the way down here in the post-disaster timeline. And it's the only show in that timeline, meaning I knew absolutely nothing about it, and it is just another one-off spin-off. So 1 year, 50 episodes, and a minor concussion later, here I am to talk to you about Blooded Orphans. You're welcome. Blooded Orphans starts just like every Gundam. About 15 minutes into it, you pause the show, put your head in your hands, and your partner walks in on you wondering if you're okay. Yeah, I'm fine, babe. I just started a new Gundam. There's like 20 characters and 5 different political factions, and I can't remember any of their names. But don't take my debilitating brain aneurysm at face value. Blooded Orphans is anything but a regular Gundam. The story begins on Mars, where a group of young orphans working as soldiers for Chris Guard Security, or CGS, are given the simple task of protecting a young aristocrat named Kudelia Ina Bernstein. Kudelia is the most prominent figure in the Martian independence movement, and she's seeking safe passage to Earth in order to negotiate with one of Earth's economic bloc leaders for Mars's autonomy. Simple, right? Not. You think there isn't a dickload of backstory that goes into those relatively complex political goals I just mentioned? This is a Gundam series, you idiot. We have literally centuries of lore to cover before we even get you to the first episode. So first off, it's year 323 PD, which you might think stands for Penguin Disco or Pansy Delosi, but actually means post-disaster. So obviously the first question you're gonna ask is, what was the disaster? And the answer is a calamity war that happened over 300 years ago, you dummy. Should have learned this in history class. Now it's this vague, not fully explained near humanity ending conflict that gave rise to AI-run, fully autonomous mobile armors and human-piloted Gundam frames made specifically to combat them. So as you might expect, humanity was fighting each other as they are wont to do because we are in sci-fi robot land. They designed mobile armors as a way to fight remotely. However, the AI, which was originally designed to only target soldiers, eventually evolved, went rogue, and expanded its targets to include all of humanity. It also learned to self-proliferate and self-repair, meaning it could make its own army and continually replace its own parts in perpetuity. Basically, humanity was totally and we're like 5 years away from that happening with ChatGPT, but at least we're gonna get mech suits. Now, as the mobile armors turned on all of humanity, humanity in turn banded together regardless of nationality in order to have any chance of surviving certain extinction. And this is where the Gundams finally come in, right? Now, only 72 of these beefcakes were ever created because it was so difficult to successfully create the powering parallel Ahab reactor systems that run them. The Gundam frames were further integrated with humans through the Alaya Vinyana system, which sounds like a scam weight loss routine or something something the Krishnas try to hand you at concerts, but it's actually an interface that allows humans surgically implanted with the system to control the Gundam as though it was an extension of their body. Kind of like G Gundam, but not at all like G Gundam. Gundam were also equipped with nanolaminate armor, which is a special type of protection specifically designed to resist the mobile armor's beam weapons and other projectiles. This armor is the strongest that man has ever made. Regular ammunition basically does nothing to it. It's also paint. It's literally a coat of paint, and it chips off and you have to repaint it. I'm not kidding. But it's really important paint because these AI mobile armors managed to get their hands on it and replicate it. Now they're even more impossible to kill. How will we ever save the human race? Introducing Dainsleeve. Sound familiar? You might have seen it in Final Fantasy Type O or Genshin Impact or one of the many Castlevanias or Black Clover or Bloodstained Ritual of the Night or High School DxD. Point is, Dainsleeve is historically a mythological Norse Viking sword whose name has been used by a billion different franchises for cool magical swords. In Blooded Orphans, it's a railgun. But it's not just any railgun. This thing can pierce the armor paint. You heard me right, this thing is stronger than nanolaminate armor. It's also a super long range weapon, like you can shoot these from outside the atmosphere and level an entire area on a planet. So while the Gundams were extremely good at close range combat against mobile armors, the true winner of the war were these giant needle shooters. They were so good at what they did and so deadly, they literally broke apart the moon, and all of humanity agreed to ban them from use immediately following the end of the war so they couldn't be used in the future when humans would inevitably fight each other again, because that's what we do. And yes, this is all very relevant to the show, I promise. First, we need to talk about Agnika Kairu. He was a Gundam pilot, an exceptionally skilled Gundam pilot, and more importantly, he operated the ASWG-01 Gundam Bale, which was of course the very first Gundam frame. His success in the Calamity War made both him and Bale arguably spiritual icons of the post-war reconstruction. He used that newfound popularity and power to found the peacekeeping organization Gjallarhorn. The organization was founded and run by the 7 Stars, the families of the 7 Gundam pilots who fought alongside Agnika, and continues to be run by their descendants to this day. Nepo babies, all of them. Now there are more Gundam frames that couldn't be recovered, but Gjallarhorn destroyed all their cockpits in order to keep the Alaya Vijnana design from being recreated. Post-war, it also became extremely taboo to implant the Alaya Vijnana system into anyone else, rendering it nearly impossible for anyone to use any Gundam frame they might happen upon, and definitely impossible to operate one at full power. That meant that the newly formed Gjallarhorn had massive military might over everyone else and was able to keep any newly formed factions in line under said power. Newly formed factions like the 4 new economic blocks of Earth, which is Arbrow, the Strategic Alliance Union, SAU, the African Union, and the Oceanian Federation. Said economic blocks are still around 300 years later, and in present day, Kudelia Ina Bernstein is on her way to negotiate with the Prime Minister of the Arbrow bloc, Toganosuke Makanai. And don't bother remembering his name, we're not going to talk about him for like another half hour. But we can finally talk about the show. I gotcha again. This is still a Gundam series, you nutsack. You think we can get into the show before talking about the current political and economic situation in the series? Absolutely not. First off, the situation between Mars and Earth is a complex one. Mars is technically colonized by the Earth blocks, but in reality, Mars is just too far away to be effectively governed by Earth. Instead, it's essentially governed by the Gjallarhorn Mars branch. Now that doesn't mean much in terms of civil laws, bodily autonomy, or anything you'd expect from a governing body. What it does mean is that the exports are heavily regulated, specifically half metal, a natural Martian resource that is an essential and main ingredient in things like mobile suits and nanolaminate armor. Because this resource is so heavily regulated, Mars can't sell it to the Earth blocks for what it's actually worth, so Earth is stripping Mars of its primary resource in export while barely keeping the majority of the population of its own planet above the poverty line. This is classic colonization economics and always what starts shit in Gundam series. Now the lack of any actual government also created an indentured servitude style labor force from the sales of orphan children into the workforce. These children are called human debris. A little bit on the nose. And they typically serve a lifetime of service with no form of payment, severe working conditions, and horrible treatment from their owners. They are child labor slaves. This treatment typically scars these kids with an ingrained belief that not only are their lives worth nothing, but they are destined to die in space. In CGS, they're the kids with the red stripe on their jackets to differentiate them from the normal child soldiers who just get paid really badly. Kudelia, while the primary de facto leader of the Martian independence movement, is going to Earth to negotiate for Martian autonomy. She is specifically after the deregulation of half metal, which if left to the natural laws of supply and demand will vastly improve the lives of Martians and put Mars well on its way to an equal playing field with Earth, hopefully get rid of the child soldiers. So think of it as the first step of Mars independence. It's basically impossible to negotiate for governing independence when your economy is still controlled by the other party. We love Gundam. Now, Gjallarhorn has been the military muscle of the solar system for 300 years. Their primary goal is to keep the peace, but that peacekeeping role really just means that anyone who wants to shake the status quo of the current system is an enemy of Gjallarhorn. Basically, the US in the current world political structure. Top dog don't want nobody vying for the spot, you know? Of course, maybe, I don't know, maybe the top dog's pretending like China isn't the top dog. It's hard to say. So since Earth currently is dependent on the Mars colony for their half metal, Kudelia's mission is a threat to their peacekeeping. So if they can stop Kudelia from ever reaching Earth, it'll be a heavy blow to the Martian independence movement, no negotiations will occur, and their precious status quo will be maintained, and Mars will continue to have child slaves. And since Earth is the primary power in space, they don't necessarily feel the need to follow all the rules in order to get what they want. Now there's one more major player in the political and economic spaces of this universe. Teiwaz is a giant business conglomerate based in the Jupiter sphere and has a number of subsidiary groups working in massive range of businesses. We're talking heavy industry, construction, manufacturing, wholesale and retail trade, financing, medical care, private military work, transportation, you name it. However, it is run in a similar style to the Yakuza, including customary sealings of bonds between members by sharing sake and thinking of those bonds as family ties, not business relationships. Teiwaz is big enough and powerful enough that even Gjallarhorn has to give them some respect and leeway when it comes to their members. So you got the 4 Earth economic blocks that are profiting off of Mars's resources, but are also completely dependent on them. Gjallarhorn, the space peacekeepers, who of course are overextending their reach and dominance to the detriment of Martian society, and the Martian independence movement, who is being headed unofficially by Kudelia, who has been named the Maiden of Revolution. And in the middle of this giant political mess, there is a small Martian paramilitary unit called the CGS. More specifically, their 3rd Army Division, which is comprised completely of child soldiers and human debris. Now we can get to the show, for real. So Kudelia has specifically asked for the 3rd Army Division of CGS to accompany her to Earth so she can, quote, share the pain of the child soldiers who work there. Definitely not exploitative or whatever. She arrives and is greeted by the 3rd Division's Captain Orga Itsuka, as well as 3 of the other primary members of the group, Biscuit Griffin, Eugene Stark, and Mikazuki August. And shit starts hitting the fan almost immediately as Kudelia's father has completely sold her secret plans out to Gjallarhorn, and the Mars Division commanding officer intends to capture or kill her before she ever leaves the planet. Now, as the attack on CGS begins, the 3rd Division is thrown on the front lines while being told the rest of the organization will flank and attack from the back. But that is a absolute lie. The adult units and president of the organization are taking the money they have and fleeing the battle while using their child soldier team as a diversion from the escape. Essentially, Orga and his team are left to die defending Kudelia, who is also likely going to die. Now, I've neglected to mention one unique and important aspect of Orga's team. Many of them have Alaya Vinyana implants. It is a requirement for any child joining CGS, and the surgery is forced on any human debris. Now, how is that possible, you might ask, right? Gjallarhorn destroyed all traces of the system in order to keep its design a secret. Well, it's never fully explained how the technology was leaked to the outer spheres, but the version these kids have is not complete. The current version used on Mars has a low success rate and can even paralyze the person if it doesn't take. It also can't be used on adults and must be done on children in order to let the implant fuse and grow with the body's natural growth cycle. It's like these child slaves were meant to be. Now, the surgery can be done multiple times, and the more successes, the more in tune the body will be with any machine it connects to. Most children in Orga's unit have 1 implant, a couple have 2, but only 1 kid has successfully gone through the surgery 3 times. Now, the reason they get this surgery is to be able to operate these futuristic tank machines called mobile workers. It's their primary battle bot, has mounted side guns, and is pretty agile. There's a commander variant and a space variant for different types of jobs in combat. And while they're pretty good at fighting, they can't really do anything to a mobile suit thanks to the nanolaminate armor. So when Gjallarhorn sends down 3 mobile suits to join the fray, the 3rd Division is absolutely screwed. They only have 1 chance for success, and that success relies on their single 3-time implant plant survivor Mikazuki August. Now stashed away and used as a power reactor in the bowels of CGS headquarters is a Gundam frame with working AHAV reactors. Despite Gjallarhorn destroying the cockpit 300 years ago, CGS was able to install a replacement similar to the cockpits of the mobile workers they use. However, this is the first time it's ever been tested for actual combat, because of course they need it, the mobile workers aren't doing anything against these mobile suits. So just before the 3rd Division is about to be overwhelmed and wiped out, Mikazuki emerges from the ground and completely overwhelms one of Gjallarhorn's mobile suits. Gundam Barbatos is back in service. And yes, it is Barbatos, it is not Barbatos. As you could probably tell from the other Gundam called Bale, these Gundams are named after the 72 demons of King Solomon. It's a whole thing. You'll see it in other anime too, as well as like Magi. Anyway, Mikazuki is able to repel Gjallarhorn's attack, and the adult leaders and other divisions of CGS return to the base. However, the 3rd Division has not forgotten how they were left to die, so these kids perform a coup d'etat, and the 3rd Division rebels against the adults to take control of CGS, renaming the group to Tekkadan, the Iron Flower. And this isn't like a cute coup d'etat, this is like bullets in the forehead coup d'etat, bullets from kids. Now Orga becomes the leader of the company with Eugene as second in command and Biscuit as the primary advisor. Mikazuki is essentially their secret weapon and primary firepower. His abilities and skill with Barbatos are unmatched thanks to his innate skills in triple implant, despite connecting with the machine having some negative effects on his body. For instance, the first time he connects, his nose begins to bleed, and as he accesses more and more of Barbatos' power, his body will suffer further and further, again, just like eating Chipotle. Now with the company reorganized and fully run by these competent children, they recommit to the mission of getting Kudelia safely from Mars to Earth. The only problem is, Gjallarhorn controls the paths to Earth. It's a bit weird, right? Space is kind of big. You think you'd be able to like sneak past them, but apparently this is kind of a big deal. So now Tekkadan needs an alternative route and someone who can guide them. Now luckily there is another organization with their own routes between Mars and Earth, the Tewas. The problem is that there's no way to get a hold of them directly. You need an introduction from somebody already in Tewas in order to do business with Tewas. So the kids end up fighting the Turbines, which are one of the primary subsidiaries of Tewas, impressing their leader Naze and getting an introduction, joining Tewas, and having the Turbines escort their ship along the Tewas path to Earth. And that wraps up about the first 10 episodes of season 1 and offers a solid stopping point before getting into the rest of the series. And I want to stop here because while we've gone over the history, how Tekkadan gets started, and the overall plot of get the girl to Earth, we've heavily neglected the most important aspect of the show, which is the characters. You know what they're doing, but we haven't gone into detail as to why they're doing it. What's their motivation? What are their goals? What drives their desires? The real intrigue and depth behind Blooded Orphans comes from how these kids deal with the absolute shit hand they're dealt and succeed despite all of the odds against them. Most importantly, we need to talk about Orga and Mikazuki. These two carry both the show and Tekkadan on their shoulders. Besides Orga's insane I gel all my hair except this one long guy haircut, he's an exceptional leader whose primary goal is to put the newly named Tekkadan on the map. He's heavily burdened with the immense responsibility of both guiding and protecting his comrades and is adamant in his pursuit of creating a better life for them. You see, the true goal of Tekkadan is to eventually stop existing, right? To stop fighting, because hopefully these kids can get a job where they don't have to. The current political system and economic status of the universe doesn't allow that though, so Orga's entire long-term plan banks on carving out a place for his crew that is safe from the violence they must go through now. He's a gifted strategist, often outplaying Tekkadan's enemies with planning instead of just brute force, but he also understands that for his dream of a safer and easier life for his crew to become reality, they have to take risks now, put their lives on the line, and make allies with sometimes questionable people and organizations in order to make that happen. His leadership and charisma inspires incredibly fierce loyalty from his crew. There is few, if any, that wouldn't lay down their life to ensure survival, and they trust his decisions implicitly, none more than Mikazuki though. And I think that's the most fascinating aspect of Orga is his relationship with Mikazuki. They're each other's closest friends, and their bond creates the core of Blooded Orphans. Orga completely relies on Mikazuki to ensure his plans succeed in their execution, fully believing in his strength as a pilot. In turn, Mikazuki is utterly devoted to Orga in a way that is borderline sociopathic. In fact, Mikazuki is so detached seemingly from like empathy for anybody else, that through the entire show is like, is this the hero? It often feels like he doesn't have emotions and his only moral compass comes from Orga's orders. He kills without hesitation, feels no remorse about it. It doesn't matter who he's killing or why. All that matters is whether or not Orga said to do it. In a way, this makes him the perfect soldier, right? A fighter that will never hesitate and always obeys orders without questioning them. However, after completing the entire series, I don't think that Mikazuki is actually a sociopath. His loyalty goes deeper than just Orga, and you can see emotion bubble up from deep down when certain events trigger them. His moral ambiguity is purposeful and impactful because this world is so harsh and unforgiving, especially for him and his friends. There's very few truly good or truly evil characters, because it's Gundam, but there are many shades of gray depending on your point of view. Mikazuki is the apex of that moral ambiguity. He doesn't view good or evil, he only sees friends and enemies regardless of intention. And that's a difficult pill to swallow when he is more or less the main character. When your kill or don't kill decisions are friend or not friend, your morality is basically non-existent. You're living in a black and white world. And when you add the fact that friend and not friend is defined by somebody else, in this case Orga, Mikazuki leaves you with a special sense of unease. To him, the ends always justify the means, even if the means require sacrifices on his part. Both Orga and Mikazuki grew up in the slums of Mars, and it's obvious their rough upbringing has rubbed off on their personalities today. Mikazuki is emotionally a brick wall, and Orga is desperate to ensure his team will have a better life down the line and will never return to that poverty that both of them came from. They make their decisions for their chosen family to ensure their safety and happiness, even though they ironically, a lot of them die. But the idea of family is another important theme in this show. Very few of these kids actually grew up with a family, and basically none of them have anywhere to return to. Tekkadan is all they have. They rise or fall with this organization. And that of course puts so much more pressure on Tekkadan to succeed. It's not just a job, it's survival. But you can see that pressure turn into determination, but also sometimes desperation from Orga and Mikazuki specifically. Now, Kudelia is adopted into Tekkadan's family over the course of the show, but she's initially quite naive and idealistic. She's grown up incredibly privileged and sheltered, and you get just a glimpse of her house at the beginning of the show, but there's massive halls, huge botanical gardens. Her family is the most well-to-do you can be on Mars, and in a place with that kind of class division, that's huge, like beyond huge compared to the kids in the CGS at the time. And of course, you only get that wealthy at the expense of others, and her family also heavily benefits from maintaining the status quo on Mars, hence her father completely selling her out to die. Kudelia only truly begins experiencing the injustice of Martian children firsthand through Tekkadan. Her journey through the show is more about change and discovering her true motives for Mars independence. At the beginning, she wants to tell the kids that, oh, we're the same, we're equal, but she comes to understand the real depths of oppression and exploitation they've faced, not to mention that ingrained belief that human debris is completely worthless. This new understanding that not all people are created equal fuels her determination to fight for their rights and to use her privilege to amplify their voices, to try and balance out the scales. Despite Kudelia starting as a more passive observer who feels helpless, she quickly subverts that damsel in distress role to become an active and key player in the series' overarching narrative. The Maiden of Revolution doesn't just talk the talk, she eventually walks the walk. She's also around the same age as Orga and Mikazuki. I don't recall their ages exactly ever being officially said, but assume we're looking at 16 to 17 year olds here for them. And for the record, they're like the senior members of their, child organization. So that's 3, but look guys, it's impossible for us to go over every single one of these characters in depth. There's at least 15 plus members of Tekkadan who have regular speaking roles, but I do want to point out a few others that play really important parts in the story. Starting with Biscuit, who's best boy. Love the Biscuit. He often acts as Orga's moral compass to keep him in check and doing what is right for Tekkadan. If Biscuit thinks whatever plan is the right thing to do, it typically is. Orga relies on him to make sure he doesn't go too far, push the group too hard, or order something that is unreasonable or just straight up morally wrong. He's a secondary character, but probably the most important one of the series, as we'll see later on. And he's also one of the only kids with a family on Mars. He has 2 sisters named Cookie and Cracker, and that's adorable. Another exceptionally important character is Atra. She's a friend of Tekkadan, comes on as their cook during their travels, and has a close relationship to both Mikazuki and Kudelia. She simps for Mikazuki and has for a while, and initially sees Kudelia as romantic competition, but as the three get closer, she discards that jealousy and instead hopes that the three of them can be a family down the line. She even makes matching bracelets for all three of them to wear to symbolize that connection. And she represents an important and often overlooked aspect of war, right? The people who are waiting for the soldiers to come home, who do the grunt work like cleaning and making food, and have to accept that there might be a day when the person they love never comes back. She is a constant on the Tekkadan ship and gives Mikazuki someone exceptionally important in his life to protect beyond just Orga. And I don't want you guys to just think that the kids from Tekkadan are the most important, because there's plenty of characters in Gjallarhorn that we're going to get to later on, but here's one. This is Naze. Naze is the leader of the Turbines. He becomes Orga's sworn brother when Tekkadan joins Teiwaz, and this dude goes above and beyond for Tekkadan. I'm sure his initial impression was skewed for a lot of people, right? This guy wears an all-white suit and a fedora, and his ship is filled with women who he outright says are his harem. He also just like baby mills them, but apparently every single woman on that ship wants to be there, is happy with the relationship they have, they respect each other, and Naze returns that respect back to them. It's actually an incredibly well put together, if not probably unrealistic, polygamous relationship, and by far the best example of healthy harem dynamics I think I've seen in an anime, even if it's weird. And seeing that happiness and dynamic rubs off on Atra and helping her rethink about how Kudelia is also a part of her family, not just a romantic rival. I guess anything goes in space, have fun. But beyond that, Naze is Orga's older brother support system, right? He listens, advises, and teaches Orga about the meaning of being the head of a family, how to support and provide for your family, and deal with the difficult choices that come with being at the head of Tekkadan. He lets a bunch of his wives stay with Tekkadan in order to help with battle and training, acts as Tekkadan's escort to Earth. This guy literally goes to the moon and back for his chosen family, and that definitely rubs off on how Orga thinks about Tekkadan. And we're not going to discuss him a ton moving forward just for the sake of time, but he's super important to the show because of the lasting impact that he made on Orga and Atra specifically. Alright, so we're back to the story. There's multiple fights and events that happen on the way to Earth. There's a battle with a pirate group called the Brewers that's really all about human debris and changing their perspective on life. There's a stop at some other Earth colonies called the Dorts that are just about to start an uprising against the government for equal rights. And this obviously affects Kudelia as she sees that Mars isn't the only place being oppressed by Earth, and hardens her resolve to help oppressed people everywhere. She's a regular Mother Teresa if Mother Teresa wasn't a horrible person. Now, in the middle of that uprising, there's also an assassination attempt on Kudelia's life, and her maid, who is kind of a double agent, but not really, at the last second dies. There's a lot of struggle and turmoil and death on the way to Earth, enough that Tekkadan has a full-fledged funeral for the numerous deaths of their comrades. Eventually, Tekkadan and the Turbines do make it to Earth, only to find their path blocked by the Outer Earth Orbit Regulatory Joint Fleet. The ORGIF is too long of an acronym and a stupid name. It's also a stupid fleet led by a stupid woman named Karta Issue. Now, they're just another branch of Gjallarhorn, and I know I've basically left them as a faceless organization so far, but that's about to change. Karta is annoying and has these red eye line things that are dumb, and she's dumb, so I guess it fits. Her entire fleet is viewed as just a big show without any real power, kind of like the TSA, and honestly, that's the best analogy I can make, because Karta acts exactly like a TSA agent who's drunk on their tiny bit of fake power. She's way too big for her britches, and her family is one of the 7 stars, so her entire fleet respects her just because, you know, Nepo baby. She really shows no skills to back up or earn that respect, and Tekkadan absolutely wrecks her and her fleet as they come into Earth's orbit. But let's talk about Gjallarhorn. There are 3 other primary members we haven't gotten to yet, right? We got McGillis Farid, Galio Baldwin, and Ian Dalton. God, there's so many fucking characters. Both McGillis and Galio are sons of the heads of 7-star families, Galio through blood and McGillis through adoption. Ein is just a mobile suit fighter for the Mars division, but he ends up joining Galio and tracking down Tekkadan to get revenge for Mikazuki killing his superior officer. McGillis and Galio start the series as inspectors for Gjallarhorn, checking in on the Mars fleet in order to ensure they're acting appropriately and not, say, completely botching a job to kill a young politician on her way to Earth. While Galio believes in Gjallarhorn's foundation and is a loyal soldier committed to the cause, McGillis is another story. Throughout the first season, his stated goal is to uproot corruption within Gjallarhorn, and he actually sees Tekkadan as an important ally to further that agenda. Every time Tekkadan is able to thwart Gjallarhorn, it further increases his opportunities to gain power within the organization and affect change. The lower Gjallarhorn's status, the more power he's able to grab from people who are proven unreliable. However, McGillis isn't exactly a good guy. He's not on Tekkadan's side, or anyone else's for that matter. He is completely fine betraying allies to further his agenda, including the closest friends he has and even his father down the line. His goal is to bring Gjallarhorn so low that the current leaders of the 7 stars need to go into exile, creating a power vacuum that he alone can fill. He believes Tekkadan can help him achieve that goal, so he's an unstable and unreliable ally at best. At multiple points he ends up fighting Mikazuki Mobile Suit to Mobile Suit, only to disguise himself later on and help Tekkadan when they need it. Of all the characters, he is the most chaotic and is always playing both sides, but that chaos comes in the form of cold, calculated planning in order to direct that chaos into fulfilling his plans. He makes you question things like, do we really want a power-hungry asshole as the main guy making reforms to one of the most powerful organizations in the universe? Checks Supreme Court. He's also engaged to Galio's younger sister, and by younger, I mean like 9 years old. It wouldn't be Japanese if it didn't have that, but it's also completely part of his plan, but we gotta get into that a little bit later down the line. Now, Ein is a young officer who asks to accompany Galio after the attack on Tekkadan, and he gets horribly injured later on in the story, taking a likely fatal blow to protect Galio. His true purpose comes into play during the climax of the story, so we're gonna revisit his plotline then. So back to the plot, right? Tekkadan makes it through the Earth's atmosphere, Mikazuki does it riding another mobile suit like a skateboard to take the brunt of the damage, and they're finally able to meet with Toganosuke Makanai, the guy I said we'd get to like half an hour ago. He's got a super cool anime beard and kind of this grandfather-esque feel to him, but he's also very blunt when he needs to be. Kudelia finally gets to sit down and discuss deregulating half metal with him, and he's totally for it. There's just one small problem though, this guy is no longer the Prime Minister of Arbrow. In fact, he's currently in exile after being forced to resign his post due to alleged corruption charges. Now, I'm pretty sure those were trumped up charges, but the fact remains that he has zero power at the moment. However, an election for Prime Minister is only days away. Makanai is asking Tekkadan to safely take him from his exile to that meeting where he'll have enough votes to get re-elected. The point of all that is, Tekkadan has fulfilled their mission to bring Kudelia to Earth. Hooray! Technically, they're at a crossroads here, right? So they can go back to Mars if they want to, if Gjallarhorn will let them. Spoiler, they won't. Or they can take on a new job on Makanai's request and help him get to the election meeting. Orga decides that it makes the most sense for Tekkadan to proceed forward instead of going home like little bitches. They don't have a safe way back home anyway after humiliating Carta as badly as they did. She's not going to take that embarrassment sitting down. Plus, if they can get Makanai to that meeting, it'll make Tekkadan a household name for beating Gjallarhorn single-handedly. Plus, it'll further McGillis's plan to gaining more influence in the organization. But hold on, for the first time in Tekkadan's short history, not everybody is enjoying or wanting to go along with this plan. Biscuit, in particular, is not having it. He thinks it's too dangerous to take on more. They've gotten this far, but they're pressing their luck on getting everyone out safely. Taking on this mission would be more dangerous than the entire trip to Earth combined. They'd have to fight Gjallarhorn head on. Biscuit and Orga have a short but intense fight that ends with Biscuit saying he's going to quit Tekkadan. Now, if you've watched a lot of yourmoviesucks.org, you know that Adam always gets mad when two characters fight because it's always used as a emotional trigger to make them, making up all that more like, oh, it makes me feel good. So, right, well, you know what's gonna happen here. I know what's gonna happen here, right? They're gonna get pissy for a bit, and then they're gonna come back together, and they're like, we're brothers, we're family, we're friends, blah, blah, blah. Biscuit! Well, shit. So while the two are planning on talking it out, they gotta put their conversation on hold as they are suddenly attacked by Gjallarhorn out of nowhere. It's Carta issue again. She's butthurt Tekkadan beat her fleet so badly. But this time, instead of focusing on fighting, she makes the pretty damn smart call of going for Tekkadan's leader. Biscuit is driving the mobile worker Orga's commanding from, and in a last-ditch effort to save his life from Carta's faster and stronger mobile suit, Biscuit literally chucks him from the mobile unit, saving Orga and sacrificing himself in the process. And I'm gonna be real, man, this death, that one hurt. Biscuit was the heart and soul of Tekkadan. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people have already died in this show, and we've skipped over them because they aren't totally or weren't totally essential. But Biscuit is pretty central. And more than just that, I'd argue his death affects the entire rest of the storyline. He's part of the core circle of Tekkadan, and he was just arguing with Orga about how it's getting too dangerous. And like I said earlier, Biscuit is usually right, and today, obviously, was no different. It got too dangerous and somebody died, and it was him. His death is a very harsh reality check for the members of Tekkadan. They know how risky it is to keep going now, but they really have no other choice. It's kill or be killed. They either succeed or die, but potentially, even more importantly, Biscuit was the balance to Orga's recklessness. He was a voice of reason when their plans got too iffy, and that voice is now gone. There's no one left in Tekkadan at a high enough level to really challenge Orga's decisions where he might listen to them, and I think that heavily plays into the events of Season 2. And you can see just how affected everybody is by Biscuit's death just a couple scenes later, right? Tekkadan is traveling via train to Edmonton, where the election will be held, and they got stopped by fucking Carta again. This time, she only shows up with 3 mobile suits offering a duel in place of a battle, and before she can even get the words out of her mouth, Mikazuki is on them and absolutely crushing them in anger. His voice is calm and monotone, scary, but you can see the crazed, burning hatred in his eyes. That devotion to his team comes through loud and clear when he says, quote,
"I don't care who the hell you are, because right now you're my enemy. That's all that matters."
Like I said before, his thoughts, just straight black and white. You're either with Tekkadan or you're against them. Again, is this the hero? Carta is rescued though thanks to Galio showing up and fleeing immediately with her completely insanely wrecked mech. But it's too little too late. Carta dies before he can get anywhere near her. During this fight you can also see just how far Mikazuki's piloting has come. The other mechs move as expected like machines. Barbatos moves like a living breathing organism. It's almost graceful in a way, but it's very unsettling. You can feel Mikazuki's anger getting expressed through Barbatos's near supernatural movements. So, Tekkadan finally arrives outside Edmonton with mere days left before the parliamentary meeting, but the city is locked down by Gjallarhorn's forces. Makanai's rival, who I'm sure has a name, but she's so minor I just don't care, has made an agreement with Isnario Farid, McGillis's adopted father and one of the 7 stars of Gjallarhorn. Their collusion to keep Makanai out of the city until the election is held will grant Gjallarhorn more power within the Arbrow block if it succeeds. So we're at the climax of Season 1 now, Tekkadan versus Gjallarhorn in a deathmatch as Tekkadan desperately tries to find a way to get Makanai to that re-election meeting. And this is an extremely difficult task for Tekkadan, right? They're fighting on Gjallarhorn's turf, they're trying to penetrate a city's defenses, and even worse, they can't have any mobile suit get too close to the city. The Ahab reactors the mobile suits run off fuck with electricity, so they have to keep the suit battles far enough away to keep the electronics working so the meeting can still be held. That basically means it's up to the mobile workers to clear a path, and it's just not working. With mere hours left on the clock before the meeting starts and desperation at its highest, Orga makes a move. For their last operation, he asks each and every member of Tekkadan to bet their lives on it, expect to die, but to do it knowing your death won't be in vain. It doesn't matter who lives and who dies, Tekkadan is family. You're fighting for the happiness and future of your family. It's very culty. Is this a cult? They go on an aggressive offensive. The enemy soldiers kill a ton of the mobile workers, but they keep pushing. And it shows how scary it is to be on the opposite side of an enemy who will crash face first into certain death. This is Tekkadan's D-Day, and they force the conflict onto a bridge, making Gjallarhorn redirect units in order to keep them at bay, giving Orga just enough space to cross where the redirected units left a gap. So things seem to be going well despite the numerous deaths. Orga, Makanai, and Kudelia have all made it into the city. The mobile suit unit is taking out Gjallarhorn with ease, but then suddenly Galio appears to challenge Mikazuki, and even more suddenly, a giant black mobile suit drops from the sky and starts wrecking Tekkadan's pilots. This thing's got the moves and the grooves. It's definitely an Elia Vignana pilot. So remember Ein, the guy who took a hit for Galio and got seriously injured? Well, in order to save his life, McGillis persuaded Galio to treat him with the Elia Vignana surgery and tether him to a mobile suit. He's got the same number of implants as Mikazuki, which basically puts them on an equal playing field in terms of fusion with their machine. A couple of Naze's wives get seriously hurt by him, and then even Mikazuki is struggling to keep up as Ein's remaining sanity starts to go during the battle. But upon hearing that Kudelia is in the city, he abandons fighting the other mobile suits to go after her specifically. Now as Orga is racing to get Makanai to Parliament in time, Ein lands right in front of them. His Ahab reactor is disabling all the electricity in the city. In an effort to save Orga and Makanai, Kudelia walks straight up to Ein as a distraction. Ein is about to kill her, but Barbatos flies in out of nowhere to block the attack. How'd he get away from Galio, you might ask? McGillis himself finally shows up on Tekkadan's side to fight Galio instead. So Galio's beside himself. Why would McGillis defend Tekkadan? Why would he be fighting Galio now? Well, it's all according to plan. Remember way earlier when I mentioned Galio's sister is engaged to McGillis even though she's like fucking 9 years old? Well, that comes into play now. McGillis's full plan is to help Tekkadan beat Gjallarhorn. If Gjallarhorn is beaten here and now, the corruption within Gjallarhorn will come to light. First off, Gjallarhorn strongly advocated for 300 years that bionic modification is evil, yet they created Ein, a huge contradiction to that rule. They've been improving and perfecting the Alaya Vijnana system in secret this entire time, which is another huge contradiction. Gjallarhorn is also supposed to be a silent observer and protector of Earth, but they are actively interfering with an election by colluding with one of the parties and trying to stop the other from attending. Public perception of Gjallarhorn would plummet if all of this came to light, as would the power of their current leaders. Karta, the only daughter of the Issue family, the most powerful family of the 7 stars, has already died. If Tekkadan wins, Inzario Farid would be forced into exile for his part in directing Gjallarhorn's collusion in this election. That leaves the Farid seat to McGillis as the adopted and only son. And with Galio out of the picture, the power of Baldwin will fall to their next in line, which would also be McGillis, as his engagement to Galio's underage sister makes him the Baldwin's son-in-law and only person who could take Galio's place. So in one fell swoop, McGillis would completely disassemble Gjallarhorn, remove the most powerful family's heir, and set himself up with the power of multiple families in the 7 stars. I don't understand how people manage to write this shit. That is a lot. And in a lot of ways, McGillis is totally correct. Gjallarhorn is not practicing what they preach. He's not the primary cause of corruption in Gjallarhorn, but he's definitely purposefully exacerbating it by manipulating Galio into having the Alaya Vijnana surgery done to Ein. It's a huge attempt at a power grab, but all perfectly legal in terms of his position within the families in Gjallarhorn's structure. As long as he can get away with killing Galio, that is. Speaking of, he completely wrecks Galio, stabbing his mech right through the proverbial heart. So Galio is now out of the way, Karta is out of the way, the path is opening up for McGillis' rise to power. All that needs to happen now is Makanai getting elected and Mikazuki beating Ein. Now when we do switch back to that fight, it's obvious that this is the toughest opponent that Mikazuki has ever faced. Like I said, Gjallarhorn has been perfecting the Alaya Vijnana system in secret, and it shows. Mikazuki is getting overwhelmed, overpowered, it's not looking good. But his system isn't complete. It can't safely pull the same power from his body that Ein's can. The keyword there, though, is safely. In order to protect his friends, Mika asks Barbatos to give him more power, all the power that Barbatos can unleash. His arm begins to spasm as Barbatos almost seemingly comes alive, starts connecting even more with Mikazuki's body. The capillaries in one eye break, his nose begins to run with blood. That power comes with a price, but once it's paid, it can never be taken back. At the same time, in Parliament, Makanai yields his time to Kudelia, who begins to spill the beans on everything illegal Gjallarhorn has done to stop her arrival on Earth. Meanwhile, Orga finally gets to tell all of Tekkadan that the job is done. Don't fucking die now. Make sure that you live by any means necessary. It's the order he's been waiting to say since they started their job back on Mars. No more dying, no more sacrifice, we did it. And as he talks to Tekkadan, he's racing towards Mika's fight with Ein. And just as Ein looks to have Mikazuki down, Orga reaches them, yelling for his friend. Hearing Orga's voice, it's like everything finally clicks together, and Mikazuki's power finally surges. His speed is increased, dodging the killing blow, and in one fell swoop slices off the arm of Ein's suit and pierces the cockpit. It's over. He finally understands how to really use Barbatos to its full effectiveness. Makanai is re-elected. A ceasefire between Gjallarhorn and Tekkadan is called. Makanai deregulates half metals from Mars after negotiating with Kudelia. They have won. A victory stacked upon the bodies of many, many children, but they can finally go home. However, Mikazuki has also paid the troll toll in order to pilot Barbatos at this max level of power. His right arm no longer works at all outside of Barbatos. He's crippled basically unless he's piloting the Gundam. McGillis also gets everything he's desired. His father is exiled. He gets his seat on the 7 stars and fills the power vacuum left by his father's absence in Galio and Karta's death. Tekkadan doesn't go unrewarded either though. First off, they're touted as heroes, and second, Makanai hires them as a military advisor for the Arbrow block, meaning consistent pay, status, and power on Earth. It's the start of what Orga's been searching for this entire time, to carve out that safe space where his team will never need to risk their lives again. It's not there yet, but it's a start. So yay, happy ending, everything's done, woo! Except there's a season 2. With Gjallarhorn having completely failed to stop a literal group of children, a lack of belief in the organization spread throughout the rest of the economic blocks, meaning that they have to start expanding their own military powers. Alright, so to start off the second half of the script, I wanted to take a look at season 1 as a whole, right? You gotta nail down those themes because the themes become even more important in the second season. Because believe it or not, the second season actually takes a darker road than the first one. Yes. Oh, and what's that just in from Ice Level? It's Galio, not Galio.
Galio.
Figures at the one time that I use the American pronunciation of AE, which is A, instead of the correct Latin pronunciation of AE, which is I get it wrong. 4 years of Latin class was mostly a waste. Oh well, I'm not re-recording it. So anyway, season 1 is really just sewn together with the strength of chosen family bonds. It's the winning formula that pushes Tekkadan to deranged and often terrifying levels of self-sacrifice and recklessness in their fighting, but that is the thing that terrifies their enemies, that brutality which comes from protecting your family. Tekkadan is so much more than a group of kids who happen to work together. It's a community founded on the principles of trust, support, and acceptance of their members, the struggles they go through, the sacrifices they make, and the dreams they have for the future. It wouldn't be possible without that bond. The second grounding principle of season 1 focuses basically on morality. What does good and evil mean? What does right and wrong mean? Throughout the whole season, Tekkadan are the obvious good guys, the heroes in a world filled with less pure characters. They're honorable, loyal, family comes first, yet Orga knows that he is sacrificing those family members at the end of the anime. He's sending friends and kids to their death for the betterment of those who survive, trading family for power. Is that fair? Is that not the same principle as for the greater good? You know, basically the overarching villain ideal of 90% of the Marvel universe? It's basically Thanos, right? Some are gonna die, we don't know who, but those who survive will live better lives thanks to those who were sacrificed. We know Orga is almost aggressively reckless in desperation to win and get closer to his goal of a violence-free life, ironically. But should that recklessness be glorified? Gundam wants you to feel uneasy about this. The creators want you to consider the morality of Tekkadan's choices, and this is backed up by Mikazuki's complete lack of morality. He doesn't care who he kills, no regret, no remorse, and this is the main hero of the story. Is he really a good person? Is he someone worth looking up to or rooting for? I mean, think about his character if he was on the other side of the coin. Wouldn't he be considered like super evil for his complete lack of empathy and morality? These questions are further expanded in season 2. And you can say for season 1 that Tekkadan is, you know, more likable and the underdogs, which makes their win in season 1 enjoyable. That said, the story isn't over yet. But before we get back to the story, I do want to talk about, kind of the most important thing in a Gundam series that brings people into the Gundam series to watch that Gundam series, and that would be the Gundam. Barbatos and the Gundam frames are unique to this universe in their control and design, but Barbatos is pretty unique amongst all main Gundam, and it's mostly because of this. This is Barbatos' mace, its main weapon. And I'm not going to go into all the systems and upgrades the Gundam frame gets before turning into Barbatos Lupus. By the way, Lupus means dog in Latin. Well, it actually kind of means like more canine. Canus is dog in Latin. There you go, I got my 4 years back. But I wanted to point out the mace because I think it's the most important part of this Gundam. Because not only is it iconic, but it sets the tone for the entire series. Most Gundam are known for their heavy armaments, shape-shifting, speed boosters, laser blades, but Barbatos has a giant fucking hard-ass mace. Obviously, that's partially due to the nanolight armor being weaker to weapons like that, but look at it. A mace is a brutal weapon. They're used to smash, not cut. Having just recently smashed my face into the concrete and also having cut the tip of my thumb off in the past, I can definitely say that I would rather be cut than have a blunt force injury. A weapon that smashes can cause epidermic lacerations, but those lacerations on your skin are from splitting from the pressure. The real damage is done internally. Internal bleeding, destroyed organs, crushed bones. Like I said, the mace is a brutal, nasty weapon that causes a brutal, nasty death. And this is for our main hero. I mean, not only is it cool, but it shows in one image exactly how brutal this series is. I think more than any other Gundam in the entire franchise, Barbatos single-handedly sets the tone for what this anime is going to be like. So now we could stop right here and say,
wow, that was a good anime,
and die happily. Or you can proceed into season 2 and find out that there's no God. It's your choice. And of course, I already made that choice, and that's why this script goes on for another 20 plus pages. To put that into perspective, this video was 17 pages. But for everything that's left, you're gonna have to come back next week. This thing was just too big, too dense, and we had a time limit on it. So we're doing the dreaded part 2 for the dreaded season 2, which is going to be longer than this one. Yeah, and yes, so obviously the next video is going to cover all of Season 2. We're going to be going more into depth in the characters, more into depth into the Gundam frames, and we're going to wrap this thing up with a nice little bow made out of the organs of kids who shouldn't be fighting a war. So if you felt like we missed things or we glossed over certain parts, I promise you it's all going to be addressed next time. So seriously, until then, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments. Tell me what you want to see in the next video. Who knows, maybe we'll add in a paragraph or two for you. And I will see you real soon. Goodbye.